As children, almost every little boy dreamed of making something impactful and loved. David Cage was no different. Little Cage always dreamed of making stories that would make everyone think and look at themselves for once. Except, instead of writing a book or even a movie script, he started making video games. But these games of his were like no other. Rather than having the player run around shooting, looting, or doing anything else commonly found in the game, David Cage has the player thinking, choosing, and reacting. Every choice you make affects the overall story and characters. Meaning, if you make the wrong choice, you could potentially kill off your favorite character. A lot of players in this vast world of gaming have very mixed opinions on Cage and his games. So, I took it upon myself to play his 3 most popular games and finally figure out if he's really that good or if he's really that terrible. Spoilers ahead. Heavy Rain was the first game I ever heard of from David Cage. I used to watch Cow Chop play it as a kid. The look and idea of the game always intrigued me. I knew that the game had some negative aspects and a lot of critics, but I didn't know it would be this painful. Heavy Rain is a game you all probably know as well. A game about a father searching for his son who is kidnapped by a serial killer, and now has to complete jigsaw-like trials in order to find him. A concept as different and unique as Heavy Rain should be a fantastic story about care, family, and overall love. But instead, we are greeted with some of the strangest written characters I've ever encountered. And it's not just limited to Heavy Rain either. Beyond Two Souls is an entirely different beast, which we'll tackle shortly. A story focused on a father trying to save his only remaining child from a serial killer should have the player empathetic for him. It should be an easy task, borderline handed to the writers. So the fact that Ethan was so annoying and unlikable is beyond me. He's such a weird guy, and he's stupid too. He lost his first kid at a mall and somehow couldn't catch up to him. A walking 10-year-old boy, he was too slow. And then he managed to convince everyone that he was the serial killer the whole time. Not intentionally, he just naturally did that. I understand that Ethan has trauma and is just overall a bit of an introvert, but quite frankly, I don't care. None of that should ever factor into you finding your only remaining son. Also, he had plenty of opportunities to talk to anyone who could help, but he always just chose not to. He really is just stupid. After like the 4th trial, maybe even the 3rd, you are more than capable of figuring out what the address is, or at least the street name. But not Ethan, I guess. Heavy Rain has you play as 4 different main characters: Ethan, Jaden, Scott, and Madison. Out of those 4, only 2 were likable and made any sense whatsoever. We already explained Ethan briefly, so let's look at a character that I actually really liked. Norman Jaden. Jaden is an FBI agent sent to help the investigation. We learn quite quickly what kind of a man he is. He is a determined, smart, and noble person with a bit of a drug problem on top of it. Jaden shows us plenty of times that he is morally correct and feels guilt and heavy regret anytime something goes wrong. He is focused on solving the case up until the very end. He even manages to do all this while keeping himself sober, cold turkey. I would even go far enough to say that Jaden is a great character and written very well, especially when compared to other characters like Ethan or Scott. His plot twist, by the way, is horrifically bad. It doesn't make any sense. Even in the flashbacks where it shows, oh look, he did this here and there, and you just never knew it. We didn't know it because it doesn't make sense. There are so many plot holes and gaps. I guess David Cage just didn't think that one through. Writing sloppy characters is one thing though. Being completely out of touch of how normal people and society works is something entirely different, and way more impressive. Let's look at a scene from Beyond Two Souls. Little Jody here wants to go play with the other kids in the snow, and when a little boy starts just being slightly too aggressive with her, Aiden, her little ghost friend, like the main plot of the story, starts choking out the little boy. Now, no one else can see Aiden or even really knows about him besides her parents. So, why is this little kid's first reaction to blame Jody, calling her an evil witch for choking him? Any normal kid or even person would just assume that they were breathing wrong or spit went down the wrong pipe. Maybe Jody has a history of doing weird things to the other kids though, so we'll give that one the benefit of the doubt. And jump forward in the game to another scenario with a group of teenagers and homeless people.
Back off and you won't get hurt.
Looky here. It's like Bum's got a girlfriend.
What is this? Nobody does this, David Cage. Sure, there are some people out there that enjoy hurting helpless people, but those are serial killers, not asshole, like, punk teenagers. I'm only 20, and not once have I seen or heard of anyone from a high school beating up the homeless for fun, let alone recording it. And if that wasn't enough, these same kids come back later and try to burn down an entire building where Jody and her homeless friends are sleeping. Also, all on camera. And to top all of that off, instead of just striking the match and leaving, these teenagers stay around just in case these innocent homeless people happen to survive, and then they beat Jody with a bat, knocking her into a coma. What? Why? This scenario takes place in the Seattle area, so maybe people on that side of the country act like this, but for some reason, I highly doubt that. On a more positive note, however, I will say that David Cage games tend to have a great underlying theme to them. Detroit Become Human might be the most obvious representation for racism I've ever seen, but is also the best representation of it that I've ever seen. The way that the androids are treated and portrayed is nothing short of perfection. Cage has them being sold off, acting as literal slaves, getting beaten, assaulted, and has the media and society act afraid when they finally rise up. It is quite literally the exact same as how the world, and specifically the US, acted during those times. The androids are hunted and sent away to camps, like in the Holocaust and many other instances. But what makes Detroit feel so meaningful and impactful is the fact that you are on the receiving end of all of this. You get to experience what it feels like to be treated less than human and how it affects your life. Even when you're playing as Connor, an android working with the police, you still get treated like a threat or trash. It takes the entire game and countless deaths to show the world that you are truly equal. You're not going to harm anyone as long as they don't harm you. You all feel the same emotions that they feel. It is by far his best story and has the best writing and characters. And quite frankly, it's not even close. I think deep down, David Cage has the capability to write good, emotional stories, but for some unknown reason, he chooses to mainly write confusing, bad, and poorly paced ones. Currently, he and his team are making a Star Wars game, so let's hope that they give it the Detroit treatment and not the Beyond Two Souls treatment. Before we keep going with the video, I just want to say that you guys should really subscribe to the channel. I love to see the support and it means the world to me. So if you could just take a second, if you're enjoying, subscribe, I'd really appreciate that. Alright, back to the video. Now, since these are video games and not just stories, we do have to talk about some of their features. Cage must have really enjoyed the original Resident Evil games, because multiple scenes still employ the still camera angles and constantly have you turning around in the wrong direction. This is just completely unnecessary and is there strictly to just annoy me and me alone, I believe. Granted, this isn't a permanent thing like in Resident Evil 1, but whenever it is around, my day's ruined. It just ruins my whole day. Heavy Rain also uses some weird multiple shots at once to either help the player or just show someone's face while they talk, and in all honesty, I don't hate this. Sometimes I kind of like it. I think they just use it a bit too often, and it can get pretty old fast. But even I understand why. It's a fitting shot for this noir type game. Majority of the time though, the camera is at this over the shoulder third person shot, which feels so much better, and it feels like I'm actually playing. The whole reason Cage makes these games is to turn players into storytellers and to get them immersed. So putting them in fixed camera angles like a movie or a show kind of counteracts that whole idea. Locking us into a spectator view takes us further from feeling in control of the world and story. It's been said plenty of times before, but I don't think video games were David Cage's first choice as a career path. He even chooses to use mocap for everything, and real, very popular actors for his roles. I never heard of Beyond Two Souls before making this video, so when I found out that he landed Elliot Page and Willem Dafoe for this game, I was in obvious shock. That's all besides the point though. Mocap is a common practice for cutscenes in some high production games like Sonic Adventure 2, but to use it for an entire game with multiple routes and endings is crazy. As much as I'd like to sit here and badmouth Cage for it, I can't. It looks great, and majority of the time, the acting is really well performed. The character may make some strange faces at times, but I don't think that the actors really did that. Seeing a David Cage game in a normal animation style might just feel a little bit weird. But for these types of stories in the world David Cage is trying to build, I think mocap works great. You might want to buckle up for this next thing I say though, guys. It's a bit of a very hot take. I think that these games look really good graphically. I know it's never been said before, but it's true. I remember first seeing Heavy Rain back in the mid-2010s and being amazed at how real it looked. And I felt the exact same when I played Detroit. The atmosphere and detail to come from each room and block is astounding throughout these games. Beyond never wowed me as much as the other two, but I think mainly that's just because the game was miserable to play. For 2013 though, it is still very visually impressive. It just didn't stand out as much to me. Aside from my nitpicks and uncontrollable rage towards some of the choices made, it's pretty decent. They definitely improved as the games went on and took critiques and advice for everything besides the writing, but this actually leads us into our next topic of discussion. To put it bluntly, David Cage played God of War for the PS2 and experienced that first QuickTime event and said, "Yeah, I can do that." And then he played Fallout and noticed how the dialogue choices affected the world and society, and then once again said, "Yeah, I think I like that." That's pretty much every single David Cage game since Fahrenheit summed up in two simple and easy to understand concepts. And I'm not saying this as a negative, by the way. It's a fun, new way to play a game. The issue lies in the execution. We'll start with Heavy Rain once again as an example. The dialogue or action choices are almost impossible to read, at least in this game. I understand the idea behind having it bounce around and be all shaky, but like in actual gameplay, it's beyond horrible. Did they playtest this? Could David Cage himself accurately read those choices? I doubt it. And it wouldn't be as big of an issue if it didn't happen so consistently. They're spinning, blurry, and fused together. Everything that could possibly interfere with my ability to make a choice is happening all at once. The whole purpose of it is to add stress and tension to the player to better feel and understand what the character is going through, but that's not what happened when I played. It just pissed me off and I ended up picking the wrong option a few times. Once again, it's a great concept and idea, but it needed more work. Talking and making choices is only half of it though. What about the aftermath of those choices? Detroit is probably the best example of how what you choose matters. Obviously, each of these games have that feature, that's the whole gimmick, but I think Detroit simply does it the best. After each choice, the game tells you the effect it had immediately. In other words, it's like in Fallout, when you insult or threaten a clan, and then it tells you, hey, they didn't like that. Except these choices matter so much more than they do in Fallout. Choosing the correct dialogue option can unlock new choices or paths, and those new paths can either continue to ruin your relationships or grow them into something romantic. Since Detroit's plot is so big, your choices can affect more than just the person they're directed towards. This whole game is about freedom and equality, so the public opinion on you is a whole nother aspect that you should be thinking about before you make a decision. In my playthrough, I worked very hard to ensure that I was a peaceful leader and that the public was on my side. But you could just as easily do the opposite and have the public fear you. I haven't seen a game have better results than this one, especially out of David Cage. One thing that's pretty consistent throughout his games, however, is clunky movement, taking us back to Beyond Two Souls, or as I have come to call it, Purgatory. Before we start though, I just want to say that Detroit's movement really wasn't bad, but that game is a paradox coming out of this studio. Okay, back to Beyond Two Souls. This game has a billion more issues besides the movement, and it would be a lot shorter for me to just name the positives out of this game, but by far, the movement pissed me off the most. Mainly doors. I'm not a game developer, nor do I have much, if any, knowledge about programming, but it cannot be this hard to allow me to walk into a door. The fixed camera angles don't help these games out very much either. Sometimes it's fine, but other times it just gets in the way of things and I can't do what I'm trying to do. I know I already went over the flaws of the camera, but it relates when it makes this already horrific movement even worse. There really isn't much to say about the movement in these games besides that it's stiff, clunky, and you can easily get confused by the camera, so I'm just going to incorporate this other main gameplay feature in this section. Motion QuickTime events. You've all probably seen this gameplay before. The game shows you a direction to move your joystick or mouse, and then it completes the action, right? Simple enough and works well for the most part, but David really wanted Beyond to be different and stand out from the rest of his games. So, instead of the motions being simple to understand and mimic, they are annoying and hard to read most of the time. This is all due to the fact that you have to match body motion. So if Jody is dodging to the right, you have to move to the right. If she's ducking, you have to duck. It doesn't sound nearly as bad as it really is, but just take my word, it is bad. You can perfectly move your mouse in the same direction as her body, and it just won't matter. You still get hit. Sure, it's a great idea, and has potential to make the game feel way more immersive, but that's only if it works properly. At the end of the day though, it doesn't matter, because I don't think you can lose in Beyond Two Souls. I failed so many QuickTime events due to this horrible motion, and it just never mattered. So the fact that you can't lose, or at least it's borderline impossible to, also pisses me off. I played Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls on PC, and both of them fully crashed my PC. Something that very few games have managed to accomplish. Yet somehow, David Cage did it twice. That kind of sums up what his games are. They're one in a million creations. They are very unique and special to a ton of gamers throughout the world, but do you want to know what else is one in a million? Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's good. All of these games and stories have great potential. Stranger Things and Beyond Two Souls have such a similar story, and one of them blew up and became a worldwide success, and the other one I didn't even know existed. So it's such a shame to see the same flaws throughout his games. David and his team are full of great ideas, and I'm glad that they finally made an actual great game with Detroit Become Human. But the question still remains, why? Why doesn't he just write a TV show or movie, even a book? All of these could still allow the fanbase to choose how the story goes. TV shows have had polls on what should happen in future episodes or cliffhangers. The movie Clue had multiple endings in theaters, and Choose Your Own Adventure books have been around for ages. Even Super Mega made one. I watched through some interviews with Cage, and he's been saying the same thing for years. He wants to make players be their own storytellers, and that he just has a general love for writing stories. And granted, he is doing just that. He is definitely allowing players to make their own stories, and he is definitely writing some very unique stories. So, depending on how well this new Star Wars game is, we'll see if he can actually keep that up, or if Detroit was just an outlier. Each of the 3 games of his I played took me about 9 hours on average, but between Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls alone, it felt like 9 months of playtime. I took some bullet notes while playing each of the games, so I'll show those on screen now. There are some issues I have with these games, but for the sake of not repeating myself and being a whiny little bitch, that's all I really have to say about David Cage and his video games. Since I asked David Cage why, let me ask myself the same question. Why did I choose to do this to myself? I don't have an answer to that. Am I happy that I did this to myself? Honestly, I don't think I am. Will I end up miserable in a future video once again? And should you subscribe to see that happen? Yeah, probably. Thank you all for watching. And if there was anything I didn't mention, or it's just something you wanted me to talk about, please comment down below and I'll be sure to respond to you. Except if you comment that I should play Fahrenheit. You cannot pay me to do that. Actually, I take it back. 50,000 subscribers special. I will play Fahrenheit. So tell all your friends to like and subscribe. Hope to see you all in the next one.
Are you mirror gunning it? Okay. Is there anything there? I'm on your I'm on your left. Here.
See anything?
I'm on your left here.
Police, hands in the air.
Police.
Hands in the air. Put your hands up.
Okay.
It's over, entry team. Roll in.
Did we all die?